I want to begin this video by saying I'm deliberately being as unbiased as I can. I have my own opinion on a lot of these matters, but ultimately, this video is to convey the horrors of what a second US Civil War would actually look like. It wouldn't be on a farmer's field 20 miles away. It would be at your doorstep, and it would affect every single person you know. This is purely a scenario-based video with the hopes of dissuading this type of event from occurring. Peace is the best option for all of us. The United States is no stranger to division. From its founding to the modern day, it has grappled with competing visions of what it means to be American. From the ideals written in the Federalist Papers and the grudges between early American political figures, to the competing view of the direction our country should go, division has grown worse over the last 1 to 2 decades. But what if those divisions boiled over into something far worse? A second civil war. This isn't a distant hypothetical for some. It's a fear whispered in heated debates, on social media, and in the quiet of homes across the nation. Today we explore what such a conflict would look like. It wouldn't resemble the Civil War of the 1860s. It would be messier, more fragmented, and far more devastating in ways that we can only begin to imagine. The first American Civil War was a clash of regions. It was North versus South, Union versus Confederacy. Armies marched in formation, battles were fought on open fields, and clear geographic lines defined the conflict. A second Civil War would look nothing like that. There would be no neat division of states, no Mason-Dixon line to mark the battlefront. Instead, conflict would erupt in neighborhoods, towns, and counties. It would be a war of ideology, not geography, with battle lines drawn by politics, culture, and deeply held beliefs. So let's dive into some historic examples that mimic what a conflict on the home front might look like. The Yugoslav wars, which were primarily fought in Bosnia from 1992 to 1995, were highly fragmented along ethnic lines. It was the Serbs versus the Bosniaks versus the Croats, within the same territory, with no neat geographic divisions. Urban sieges, like at Sarajevo, pitted neighborhoods against each other. Militias and paramilitary groups dominated, with military defections and splintering. It escalated into race and ethnic-based atrocities like ethnic cleansing. The Syrian Civil War from 2011 to the present day is a politically motivated uprising splintered into ideological factions, like the Assad loyalists versus rebels versus Islamists. It's a county-level conflict with local areas controlled by militias and urban versus rural areas. Massive military fragmentations like defections to opposition groups, and ethnic escalation targeting the Kurds and Alawites. Foreign intervention and proxy militias amplify the chaos in this conflict. The Myanmar Civil War from 1948 to the present day was a politically triggered coup that led to ethnic insurgencies. It fragmented with hundreds of local militias in rural versus urban pockets, with military defections to People's Defense Forces, and no unified fronts, but county-level resistance. Additionally, there's the Iraq Civil War, the Second Congo War, the South Sudan Civil War, the Troubles in Northern Ireland from 1968 to 1998, and the Lebanese Civil War from 1975 to 1990. All of these examples illustrate how such wars often devolve into prolonged, low-intensity struggles with economic disruption, civilian targeting, and international meddling, mirroring the digital, militia-driven, and racially charged elements in our U.S. scenario. They rarely end decisively and instead simmer through ceasefires or exhaustion. Now, back to the home front. Imagine this. A protest in a small town turns violent when armed groups from opposing political factions clash. A county sheriff refuses to enforce a federal mandate, declaring their jurisdiction a, quote, sanctuary for one side's ideals. Across the country, neighbors turn on neighbors, not because of personal grudges, but because of what they post online, what flags they fly, or what candidates they support. This wouldn't be a war of grand armies, but of militias, vigilante groups, and lone actors. It would be fought block by block, with violence flaring in unpredictable pockets. The splintering of the U.S. Armed Forces would be one of the most alarming features of such a conflict. The military is trained to serve the nation as a whole, but in a deeply divided society, loyalties could, and frankly, would fracture. Some units may align with political factions while others refuse to engage altogether. National Guard units, often under state control, could find themselves at odds with federal orders. Imagine a scenario where a governor calls up the Guard to protect a state capital, only for federal troops to be deployed against them. Deserters, defectors, and rogue elements within the military could form their own factions, further muddying the waters. Additionally, this fragmentation would extend beyond the military. Like law enforcement agencies already stretched thin in times of crisis, would face similar divisions. Some police departments might side with local communities while others enforce federal or state directives. The result? A patchwork of authority where no one knows who's in charge. In some areas, vigilante groups or private security firms might step in to fill the void, escalating tensions even further. A modern civil war would also be fought in the digital realm. Social media platforms, already battlegrounds for ideological warfare, would amplify division. Misinformation would spread faster than bullets, inciting violence or rallying supporters to specific causes. Cyber attacks would cripple infrastructure like power grids, water systems, or financial networks, leaving entire regions vulnerable. Foreign actors seizing the opportunity may also exploit these divisions, funding proxy groups or launching their own cyber attacks to destabilize the nation further. Your local grocery store would be empty, blockades on local highways and interstates making it impossible for trucks to pass through safely. An additional prospect is the potential for race-based escalation. Political division in the U.S. often intersect with racial and ethnic tensions. A civil war driven by ideology could quickly spiral into violence targeting specific communities in specific areas of the country. Extremist groups might exploit these fault lines, framing their fight in racial terms to recruit or justify atrocities. We've seen how quickly rhetoric can inflame prejudice. Now imagine that rhetoric backed by weapons and a breakdown of law and order. The consequences could be catastrophic, tearing apart the social fabric in ways that take generations to repair. The economic fallout would be immediate and severe. Supply chains, already fragile since COVID, could collapse under the weight of localized conflicts. Food shortages, fuel rationing, and disrupted trade would hit urban and rural areas alike. Businesses would shutter, unemployment would skyrocket, and entire regions could become economically isolated. In a war without clear fronts, no area would ever be truly safe, making recovery nearly impossible while fighting continues. Let's also consider the rural and urban divide. Rural areas, often heavily armed and self-sufficient, might form their own enclaves, rejecting outside authority. Urban centers, densely populated and reliant on complex supply chains, could descend into chaos without food, water, or power. Counties might declare themselves independent, refusing to cooperate with state or federal governments. This splintering would create a mosaic of micro-conflicts, each with its own rules, leaders, and agendas. Technology would play a dual role. On one hand, it could empower smaller groups. Drones, 3D printed weapons, and encrypted communications could make militias as deadly as professional armies. On the other, surveillance technology could be weaponized by governments or factions to track dissenters, creating a climate of fear. The same tools that connect us, smartphones and social media, could become instruments of control or chaos. Ultimately, the international community would not sit idly by. A fractured United States would invite foreign intervention, whether through humanitarian aid, economic sanctions, or opportunistic power plays. Refugees fleeing conflict zones could overwhelm borders, destabilizing Canada and Mexico. The global economy, heavily tied to the U.S., would reel from the shock. Allies might struggle to decide which faction, if any, to support, while adversaries could exploit the chaos to advance their own agendas. Unfortunately, a second civil war would not end with a single surrender or treaty. It would likely drag on, with pockets of resistance persisting for years, if not decades. Rebuilding would be a monumental task, not just of infrastructure but of trust. How do you heal a nation where neighbors have turned on each other, where institutions have crumbled, and where the very idea of unity feels like a distant memory? This scenario is not inevitable. The United States has faced division before and found ways to mend its wounds. But understanding what a second civil war might look like forces us to confront the stakes. It's a reminder that the ties binding this nation, a democratic republic, the rule of law, and mutual respect, are fragile. They require vigilance, dialogue, and a commitment to de-escalation. Thank you for joining this discussion. Let's hope it remains a thought experiment and a warning. Stay engaged, stay informed, and let's work toward a more united future. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.